In this week's episode of Space Dandy, slow and steady wins the race, baby. Few series leave me at a loss for words. Space Dandy is one of those shows. This week's episode was absolutely hilarious, and one of the weirdest episodes that I've ever seen of the series. I almost don't know what to say about this week's episode. I will say that the animation was awesome. It was really stylistic, and it seemed like it was in a constant state of PCP. And there were some sequences which were frankly stunning. One sequence which comes to mind is Dandy and Meow and this alien fish on this space boat riding this whirlpool in space trying to reach this moon, which is the home planet of this fish, by the way. Do I sound like a crazy person talking to themselves in the park? No, I'm just talking about Space Dandy. I don't even know if I can do the story justice this week, like try to give you like a summary of it. What I will say is it started out real simple. It was just Dandy and his crew trying to get a bite to eat, and because Dandy is so inquisitive and always likes to go on these adventures and just sort of goes with the flow with things, he ends up buying this intergalactic flashlight, which is actually a transporter. You can actually point this at someone and it'll transport them to a random planet or wherever you want to set it. Now, the thing is, since it's just a flashlight, it actually doesn't have a very wide beam, so if you just flash it in someone's face, just their head is going to be transported somewhere, and that's exactly what happens to Dandy in the first part of the episode. He gets transported to this weird random planet that was filled with holes, and there's just this one random little anthropomorphic fish living on the planet, and somehow Dandy and Meow get caught up in this fish's adventure to try and get back home, because he's trying to warn his people because there's this massive sun that's going to come around and burn them all to death. One thing that is very funny to note is that the planet that Dandy and Meow are transported to is actually called Pushy Boyfriend, and the planet that the fish is originally from is called Girlfriend, and that actually does play into the story later on when he actually does get back home and he's confronted by one of his former girlfriends who ends up basically just shooting him down because she's hanging out with some douchebag fish. That was the weirdest thing I've ever said in any of my reviews. So let's talk about what really mattered this week, which was the humor and the animation, which was absolutely fantastic. There were a ton of great scenes. When Dandy first got to the planet, and he was trying to communicate with the fish, he was using sign language, and then they went back to the ship, and you could see Dandy, his entire body with his head missing, doing all of these weird hand signs, and a lot of them which made no sense whatsoever what he was trying to convey. But it was still a very funny scene, and it got even better when Meow actually got to the planet, because one of the other subplots of this week's episode is that Meow is starving. He's on the brink of starvation, and obviously since he's a cat, well, maybe he's not a cat, he's a Beetlejuicean, but let's face it, he's a freaking space cat. He loves fish, so when he gets to this planet, what's the first thing he sees? A talking, annoying, anthropomorphic fish. And it eventually does all lead up to this really great scene when the fish's planet is being fried by this sun, and the fish decides to run out and let himself burn, and Meow tries to capture him with this little grated thing, and it ends up catching it. It just looks like a grilled fish, and it's absolutely perfect, and they actually end up eating him by the end of the episode. Just another one of the ridiculous funny moments. But the animation is the real showcase this week. In particular, this one scene in the second half of the episode where Dandy, Meow, and the fish are riding this weird boat and trying to get up to the planet, and the fish tries to screw them over a little bit and just tries to get to his planet without them, but then Meow tries to chase him and then he falls back down, so him and Dandy actually tether themselves to each other and throw themselves into the planet, and they make a not so graceful entrance, but it's really funny because it totally reminds me of a Wile E. Coyote cartoon, just watching them slowly get ready to hit the planet. When they finally do, all you just see is a nice little poof. The end of the episode ends in typical fashion with the Gogol Empire trying to defeat Dandy, but end up getting destroyed in the process. Dandy and his crew return to the ship, ready for another adventure. So, what's the rundown on this week's episode of Space Dandy? This is an episode that begs rewatching, pretty much like the entire series, because there's a lot of details to miss. The animation and the artwork this week was pretty much perfect in my opinion. I mean, obviously, not everyone's going to agree with me. There's some people who probably will not like the drastic change in the animation this week. But I liked it. It was really distinctive, and it's going to make me remember this episode for a long time. The actual story this week with the fish and everything, I don't think I can compare that to anything that I've ever seen, and just the amount of creativity they pumped into that was really funny, and they had a lot of fun with that flashlight this week, whether it be the scene where Meow actually accidentally transported himself by pointing it into the mirror, or the scene towards the end when they're trying to move the boat and they actually end up using it, but the batteries go out, so it only takes away half of the boat, but that actually allows them to move it. There's a lot of little scenes like that that are great this week. And of course, like I said, the artwork and the imagery was gorgeous. Even in the beginning of the episode, when the adventure hadn't even started, when they went to this like weird planet that was filled with all of these exotic alien restaurants, there was just a ton of details. And of course, the voice acting and everything was great. I do need to stress that I am watching the English version of Space Dandy, but occasionally I do tune in for the Japanese one, but I'm really used to hearing it in English now, and I think the voice actors have really found their place. And I think they're doing a really great job with the dub, and it's not too often that I say that, because 99% of the time I'm watching English subs with the Japanese voiceovers. But otherwise, I loved this week's episode. I thought it was really good. It was just very strange. It's one of those episodes I'm definitely going to have to watch again. And this is a series that I definitely recommend you watch with friends because it is a laugh riot. Watch it in English if you can, but check out the Japanese version if you just don't care for it. Either way, just watch Space Dandy. It's an incredible show. I loved this week's episode, and I don't really have any complaints with it. And when I have no complaints, I give it a 10 out of 10. I just thought this was a really solid and distinctive episode of the series that I'm going to remember for a long time. So check it out, guys. Good stuff. Thank you guys for watching my review today. Before you leave, make sure and hit that like button so you can give this video a thumbs up. And also tell me what you thought about this week's episode of Space Dandy and what you hope to see from the rest of the second season. Also, guys, you can check us out on Facebook and on Twitter. I'll put links for those in the description box below. And remember, if you haven't already, to subscribe to the channel. So, guys, that concludes my review today. Super Kami Guru 9000. Peace out, dudes.